the center of all trade, the center of all money exchange. Okay? And it was also the communal center, because that's where families would gather. They didn't really have huge parks and things like this. They had wilderness, right? But they thought the most beautiful place was not a park. It wasn't the Mount of Olives. It was the temple. Everyone wanted to be in the presence of the temple, in the presence of God. Okay? And so for all those reasons, the temple was the center of Jewish life, the most important thing in their life. So you can imagine how shocking it would have been if someone comes along and says the temple's going to be destroyed. Okay? You know, for us as Catholics, we think of Vatican, right, city, as basically being our religious center in the world. If we add financial district, sure, let's add Wall Street. I know it's American, but who cares, right? And if we add like Parliament, all of, you know, our government, and then add all of our cultural centers, the museums, and all these places, put them all together in one spot, one building. And now think of what would happen if that one place were bombed or destroyed. You remember 9/11. You remember how scary that was, right? And everyone was glued to their TVs, and what's going to happen? The Pentagon and the World Trade Center, right? The Twin Towers. Well, imagine if it were everything, not just, you know, military and financial district, but everything in your life that's most important, located in one place, is now going to be destroyed. That's the way the Jews felt about the temple. Okay, so you have to see the reverence and the love and the vast importance that it had in their life. Okay, so now, God, when he speaks, he says to Moses, okay, oh, sorry, the last section, last sentence there. The Jerusalem temple was also understood to be a replica of the heavenly temple where God really dwells. And that's an awkward word to say, that God really dwells in heaven and not really in the temple, because he did, right? But we have to understand that there's different forms of God's presence. And the way that God is present in you and me is different from the way that God is present in the Blessed Sacrament. And that is different from the way that God is present in the priesthood, right? Which is different, again, from the way God is present in Jesus, right? When he walked the earth, right? All these different manifestations of the presence of God. In fact, people say God is everywhere, right? Well, what about hell? Have you ever heard that? Well, some theologians would say through his justice, God is present even in hell, right? Through his justice. So God's presence extends to every area, but in different ways and in different manifestations. And so when we say that God dwells in heaven, but his presence mysteriously somehow is also in the temple, you have to not be freaked out about that. Okay, it does make sense, certainly. Okay, so now Exodus 25, 8 to 10. God says, "Construct a sanctuary for me, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I am going to show you, as the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furniture. So you shall construct it." So God takes Moses and he shows him this vision, this image. And he tells him to build according to what he sees, exactly what he sees. So there's this understanding that the real tabernacle is in heaven. Moses gets a heavenly vision and constructs a replica here on earth. Same thing happens with the temple. Okay, in 1 Chronicles 28, verses 11 to 10. See,
11 and 10.
I don't know.
Yes.
Look it up. Chronicles 28. We'll find it somewhere. Sorry, I don't know what I did there.
Maybe it's 1 to 10.
It could be 1 to 10. That sounds, I don't know. Find it. Look it up. Okay, it says, "Then David gave to his son Solomon the plan of the porch of the temple, its buildings, its storehouses, its upper rooms, its inner rooms, and the room for the mercy seat, and the plan of all that he had in mind for the courts, and for all the surrounding rooms, for the storehouses, and for all the utensils of service, for the golden lamp stands and their golden lamps, for the tables of showbread, and for the altar of incense, even the cherubim that spread out their wings and covered the ark of the covenant of the Lord. All this, said David, the Lord made me understand in writing by his hand upon me all the details of this pattern." Okay? So every detail was revealed to David. David writes it all down, inspired by God, and gives it to Solomon. This is how you need to build the temple. Okay? So it wasn't just Solomon making stuff up. There was a reason for everything. right? And that's what we need to get a hold of here. In Hebrews 8, verses 4 to 6, it says, "There are those who offer the gifts according to the law, who serve a copy and shadow of the heavenly things, just as Moses was warned by God when he was about to erect the tabernacle. For see, he says, that you make all things according to the pattern which was shown you on the mountain." Okay? So at the time of Christ, and well, Hebrews was written afterwards, but we have this understanding that what they were serving in the temple, right? The temple itself was a mere shadow and a copy of the heavenly temple. Okay? So no wonder there was a tremendous love and respect for this temple, right? That it was the everything that they wanted and loved about God's presence. Okay? So now, what do you think happened when Jesus says in Matthew 12, verse 6, "But I say to you, that something greater than the temple is here. But if you had known what this means, I desire compassion and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." Jesus is standing in the temple area, and he says to his people, right? He's actually talking to the chief priests, right, that are criticizing his apostles. And he says here, something greater than the temple is here. This would have been a form of blasphemy, right? To say that anything is greater than the temple, there's only one thing that is greater than the temple, because the temple is the greatest thing ever because the presence of God is there, right? So what is the one thing that is greater than the temple? God himself, right? When Jesus says there's something greater than the temple that is here, he is claiming to be God. Okay, can you understand the blasphemy that they would have been accusing him of? Was it true blasphemy? No, because he is God in the presence, right? He is God. They just don't know it yet. And so when you hear this, you can imagine how shaken they were. And immediately afterwards, they still want to kill him and plot to kill him and decide all these evil things against him because of what he said about the temple, right? Something greater than the temple is here. But he also adds another thing, okay? He says, if you had known what this means, I desire compassion and not sacrifice. Okay? Here, he's criticizing the whole purpose of the temple in a certain way. Okay? What was the temple for? Sacrifice, right? And he's saying that that's not what God wants. But wasn't it God who instituted the whole sacrificial system? Who said, take these animals and slaughter them this way, and these kinds of animals, and offer them on these days? And it was God who came up with all of that, the whole animal sacrifice system, right? But why did God do it? To teach them a lesson, to bring them to himself, to show them step by step how to love, right? How to worship from the heart. Right now they're still going through the ritual, the external actions. God is looking for a change of heart, okay? Compassion, love. And when your actions come from there, true contrition, right? Love out of love, sorrow out of love. All of these things are meaningful because of the love behind them. And that's what Jesus is saying, that the temple is great and wonderful, but the real purpose of the temple is love, not the sacrifice. Okay? And then he finally says one last thing. He says, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Now there again, he's claiming to be the Son of Man, and he's saying he's Lord of the Sabbath. Well, who is Lord of the Sabbath? God, who established the Sabbath. The God who created the heavens and the earth on the seventh day established the Sabbath. To say that he, Jesus, is the Lord of the Sabbath is to claim to be the God of creation, the God of heaven and earth. Okay? So there again, three statements within that one sentence where he is realigning the purpose and the meaning of the temple and shaking up everyone that's around them because they couldn't believe that he had the audacity to say that he was greater than the temple. Okay. Colossians 1, 15 to 19. Okay. Here we have one of the most beautiful passages that actually reveals who Christ is, right? It says that he is the image of the invisible God. The image of the invisible God. And it also says, in whom the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. And so in the person of Jesus Christ, we have the fullness of God dwelling. and living among us. The image of God. God who we cannot see, the invisible God, now has a face that we can behold. Okay? So Jesus Christ is already replacing that first aspect of the purpose and the meaning of the temple, that it was the dwelling place of the presence of God. You see that? And so the fact that God dwells fully, what did it say? In whom the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. Not just part of God, but the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. Okay? The fact that Christ can claim this, the fullness of God dwells within me, means that that purpose for the temple no longer exists. Right? We don't need the temple for that because God dwells within me. Make sense? Okay. Second thing we need to know about the temple is that the temple was a microcosm of heaven and earth. Okay? And it's cool when you look at the whole story of creation. There's language that surrounds it about like the foundations and the portals and the pillars and things like that. When you look at any of the passages from Job or from Genesis or from Isaiah that have anything to do with creation imagery, right? They look at the earth and they talk about how the earth was founded by God and created by God. And you get the image that it's a house, it's a temple, that God's building a place for his people, right? It's kind of neat. And from that came this fuller understanding that God did create the entire universe to be his home, where he intends to dwell with his people. You've heard the, what place, I can't remember actually, one place is heaven is his throne, and earth is his footstool. You've heard of that, right? Other passages talk about how, well, last time actually I think I mentioned how the earth has four corners. Do you remember that? Because the earth was supposed to be the altar on which every living thing offered itself to God as a living sacrifice. Okay, so there again, temple imagery, a home and a temple, all at the same time. Right? So all of these different passages kind of meld together, and we have this impression that God is building his home by creating the universe, that God intends to dwell there with his people, but also that the image of the home that he is building is actually revealed through the temple. Okay, so the temple is a microcosm of heaven and earth, a mini replica of the universe. Therefore, it has cosmic significance. Okay. Psalm 78, verse 69 says that God built his sanctuary like the heavens, like the earth. Okay, he actually intended to do that. He built his temple to look like that. Okay. And in fact, if you look at the format that the temple was divided into, there were three parts. Okay, you probably know this. The Holy of Holies represented heaven. Right? The holy place represented the earth, the land. Okay? And the court of the Gentiles represented the sea. Okay? So you have the heavens, and what color do you think was used in the heavens? So, sorry, it's not blue. Because what do you think we need for the sea? Blue. Okay, so let's start there. Okay, let's start with the sea.
How did it get from the sea into the heaven?
No, we're going to start with the sea, and you're going to see how there's a different color that we can use for heaven. Okay, so the sea was blue, right? And so the court of the Gentiles was actually painted blue, right? The color was blue. And then you have the holy place, which represented the land. It wasn't just any land. What land was the most significant land? The promised land. Okay, so it represented the promised land, and that is why who's given the promised land? That was a gift given to the Jewish people, right? The Israelites, the promised land. And so the Jews dwell there. And so in the holy place, that's where the Jews were allowed to worship and practice, but no one else was allowed to really come in there. Okay, they were left in the sea. The poor Gentiles and the women, right, were left in the sea. And then you have the Holy of Holies. And the Holy of Holies was perfect. Yes?
But what color was the holy place?
Holy place would have been green.
Okay.
Yeah.